I can think back to the exact moment breathwork changed my life. It was the catalyst to years of study, traveling around the world to learn from some of the experts in the field, and really developing my own blend of clinical-based breathwork. Right? Today I'm going to explain to you why breathing is the single most important thing you're not addressing as an individual or as a health professional. My name's Campbell, I'm a physiotherapist and a breathing specialist, and today I'm going to shine a light on why we all should be focusing on breathing. Now, when I go back 10 years, I graduated as a physiotherapist. My first role was a weekend inpatient physio. In this role, right, a physio was placed on a certain ward. For example, you might be on orthopedics, or you could be on a cardiac care for a few months. However, these physios didn't tend to work on weekends, right? And so that's where I came in. My role was to cover a bunch of different wards to see the patients that required daily physio, right? So that needed to be seen on a weekend. And this meant you kind of had to be confident across a variety of different clinical settings. Working with a patient who just had a knee replacement obviously needs different intervention to someone that just had a heart attack, right? And so the role eventually progressed from weekends to covering leave, right? And so the orthopedic physio might be going away for a couple of weeks. I would step in and fill that role. I remember when the opportunity came up to be the ICU physio, right? The intensive care. I was terrified of intensive care. People in ICU tend to be very sick. But, growth often happens when we step outside of the comfort zone, so I did it. Now, patients that have major trauma or at end of life, some of them are intubated, which means they're breathing from a machine, right? And my role in ICU was mainly twofold. First, it was to help patients mobilize, right, to get them up and moving, and it was to ensure that they were breathing well. Right? And this is really where I began to see the importance, not of exercise, but of movement, right? Not of breath work, but of breathing. You see, when someone stops moving and breathing well, everything else is impacted. I remember seeing a specific patient, right? And this is really the moment that changed my career and really changed my life. It was an older gentleman who had a lot going on. I came over to see him and told him we were going to get him out of bed, take him for a little walk, and sit him in in a chair. All patients in ICU have their hospital bed, and then they have a recliner next to them. If they're well enough and we can get them out into that chair, there's lots of benefits of being sitting upright against gravity. Now, it took us a few minutes just to get him from laying down to sitting on the edge of the bed. He was breathing really heavily. He couldn't talk, all of his effort was just going to being able to move, right? He let me know he was ready. With a fair amount of assistance, we stood up. We literally took 4 or 5 steps, and then sat him down into that chair, and he dropped into that chair pretty heavily. After a few minutes, he kind of regained his breath and regained his ability to talk. And he said something that I've never forgotten. He said, when you can't breathe, nothing else matters. And it wasn't just what he said, right? It was how he said it. It was the conviction, the strain, the pain in his voice that struck a chord in me, right? I'd never really considered breathing as something that could be taken away. And that's a very fortunate viewpoint. And a lot of people have that viewpoint, right? Maybe they've been winded, or maybe they've experienced asthma, or maybe they've been out of their breath when exercising. But to really have your breathing taken away and to lose that ability to breathe with ease is something that I really hadn't considered, right? Most of us are fortunate enough that our breathing carries on in the background 20,000 times a day, usually without a problem. So from that moment, I really started to look at breathing in a new light. Sure, right? My patients in intensive care had troubles with their breathing. That was obvious. But as I moved to different medical wards over the coming months and in different clinical settings over the coming years, right? I worked in neurosurgery, I worked in oncology, I worked in rehab units. I saw more and more that most people were breathing poorly. And yet no one was really doing anything about it, right? My role as a respiratory physiotherapist, I would do auscultation, listen to the lungs, give people exercises to remove sputum and to have an effective cough. But this is reactive, right? We were trying to give someone strategies to help them after they'd moved into this state of dysfunction. I left the inpatient setting, meaning hospitals, and I started traveling around the world. I worked throughout the UK, where I worked in community. I worked in hospitals. I worked in general public. And again, I couldn't help but notice, right, the lack of attention that was really being paid to breathing. I worked with professional sporting teams. And here again, I was struck by the amount of dysfunctional breathing that I was seeing in athletes, right? And I couldn't help but see it everywhere I went. Young, old, sick, healthy, wealthy, poor, right? Breathing didn't discriminate. And so I decided, that I would do something about that. From that one pained statement from my patient in ICU, I've really been on a mission to help people understand the importance of breathing and address it before it becomes a problem. Right? I'm frankly sick and tired of reactive healthcare. Like, let's wait till someone is sick, let's wait till someone is broken, and then start to try and put the pieces back together. So much more can be done with preventative medicine, right? With preventative education. And that's really where my work now lies, right? There is so much more to breathwork than what is portrayed on the internet, right? To me, breathwork is about restoring the single most important function of our body to its optimal state. It has a direct impact on our body, our brain, our mood, our energy, our overall health and vitality. And it's something that we're all doing, but most of us were never taught to do it. It's free, it requires no equipment, and pardon the pun, but it's just under our nose. And so I hope this helps you just reflect on whether or not breathing, right, is something that is at its optimal state, whether you're an individual working towards health, whether you're a practitioner that helps their clients work towards health. I truly believe that if you're not addressing breathing, you're leaving a huge chunk, right, of potential for improvement on the table. Because if you're not breathing well, you're not living well. And this is my hope, and my message to you is to start perhaps paying a little bit more attention to breathing. Right? If that's something you're interested in, I would love to invite you to our free community where we look at, breathing as a skill, as a tool that we can use individually to ourselves, right, and to share with our clients. And the link to that community is below this video. Please share, please subscribe, and please breathe well.